The park bench was freezing against Keira Abbott's thighs, but she refused to move because she had been here first. And the audacity of this stranger spreading out like he owned the entire thing made her jaw tighten. She turned to look at his expensive wool coat, perfectly styled dark hair with just enough silver at the temples to suggest he was in his late 30s, maybe 40, and a face that belonged on magazine covers and said firmly, "Move over." He blinked at her, genuinely startled, as if no one had spoken to him like that in years. Maybe they hadn't. Then, to her surprise, he shifted immediately, gathering his coat closer to his body and creating a reasonable amount of space. "Sorry," he said, and his voice was deep and warm despite the November cold. "I wasn't thinking. That should have been the end of it." Keira should have opened her sketchbook, continued working on the carousel design she had been developing for the new children's museum project, and ignored him completely. But something about the way he sat there, staring straight ahead with an expression that looked almost lost, made her pause. "Rough day?" she asked, surprising herself. He glanced at her, and she noticed his eyes were an unusual shade of gray like storm clouds. "You could say that." He hesitated, then added, "Rough year, actually." Keira knew she should mind her own business. She had come to Riverside Park specifically to escape the chaos of the architectural firm where she worked, to find some peace before the evening meeting with her demanding boss. But there was something raw in his voice that resonated with her own recent struggles. "I get it," she said simply. "This bench is my therapy spot. I come here when the world gets too loud." He looked at her properly then, really looked at her, and a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Does it work? Sometimes." She pulled her wool scarf tighter around her neck. "The pigeons are terrible listeners, but they don't judge." That earned her an actual laugh, genuine and surprised. "I'm Roman," he said, extending a gloved hand. "Roman Sinclair." The name tickled something in the back of her memory, but she couldn't place it. Keira Abbott. She shook his hand, feeling the firm grip even through the layers of fabric. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching a mother push her toddler on a nearby swing set. The little girl's laughter carried across the playground, bright and clear in the crisp air. "I used to come here as a kid," Roman said quietly, "before everything got complicated." Keira waited, sensing he needed to talk more than she needed to draw. "My father would bring me every Sunday. We'd get hot dogs from that cart over there, or where it used to be, and he'd tell me stories about building things, creating something from nothing." Roman's expression softened with the memory. He was a construction worker, started his own small company eventually. Nothing fancy, but he was proud of it. "Was?" Keira asked gently. "He passed away 3 years ago. Heart attack." Roman's jaw tightened. "I was in a meeting. Couldn't be bothered to take his call that morning." The pain in those words was palpable. Keira closed her sketchbook completely, giving him her full attention. "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry," he said, but there was no bitterness in it, just exhaustion. "But it doesn't change anything, doesn't bring him back. Doesn't give me another chance to tell him that he was right about what matters in life." Something about his openness made Keira respond in kind. "My mom died when I was 22, cancer. I had just graduated from architecture school, and she never got to see any of my buildings. Never got to see me actually make it." "Have you? Made it, I mean," Keira laughed, but it came out slightly bitter. "I designed staircases and bathroom renovations for a firm that treats me like I'm still an intern. I'm 31 years old, and my biggest project so far is a carousel for a children's museum that my boss will probably take credit for anyway." "A carousel sounds pretty great to me," Roman said. "Kids will love it, that matters. Tell that to my student loans." He smiled again, and Keira found herself smiling back. There was something easy about talking to him, this stranger who had somehow become less strange in the span of 10 minutes. "So what do you do?" she asked, because it seemed like the natural next question. "When you're not having rough years." Roman hesitated, and something shifted in his expression, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. "I run a company, commercial development mostly. We build things, like your dad." "Yeah," he said softly, "like my dad, except on a much bigger, much more soulless scale." Before Keira could respond, her phone alarm went off. She swore under her breath. "I have to go, meeting in 20 minutes across town." "The carousel?" Roman asked. "The carousel." She stood, gathering her things. "It was nice meeting you, Roman Sinclair." "You too, Keira Abbott." He looked up at her, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. "Will you be here again? Same time tomorrow?" She should have said no. Should have recognized this for what it was, a moment, nothing more. But instead she found herself nodding. "Maybe. If the pigeons haven't started charging for therapy sessions." His laugh followed her as she walked away, and Keira felt something warm settle in her chest despite the cold. The next day, she told herself she was going to the park because it was part of her routine, not because she was looking for him. But when she arrived and saw Roman already sitting there, a takeout cup in each hand, her heart did a small, traitorous flip. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," he said, offering her one of the cups. Hot chocolate seemed appropriate for the weather. Keira accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. "I said maybe." "You did. I'm an optimist." "Are you?" She sat down beside him, closer than yesterday. "You seemed pretty pessimistic about your job." "Touché." He took a sip of his own drink. "How was the meeting?" "Predictable. My boss loved the carousel design and immediately started talking about how we came up with such a creative concept." Keira made air quotes with one hand. "But the museum board approved it, so at least it's moving forward." "That's something." "It's not enough," Keira admitted. "I want my name on buildings. I want to create spaces that matter, that change how people experience the world. Instead, I'm invisible." Roman was quiet for a moment, watching her with those storm-gray eyes. "Why don't you leave, start your own firm?" "With what capital, what client base?" Keira shook her head. "It's not that simple." "It never is," Roman agreed. "But sometimes the complicated path is the only one worth taking." They fell into conversation easily, talking about everything and nothing. Roman told her about growing up in Queens, about his mother who still called him every Sunday to make sure he was eating properly. Keira shared stories about her younger brother, Tyler, who was teaching English in South Korea, and sending her photos of street food that made her jealous. "You come here every day?" Keira asked eventually. "I've been using this bench for 6 months and never saw you before yesterday." "I've been avoiding it, actually," Roman admitted. "This was our spot, mine and my dad's. Felt too raw. But yesterday I had this moment in my office, staring at blueprints for another generic luxury apartment building, and I just needed to remember why any of it mattered. So I came here." "And did you?" "Remember, I'm starting to." The way he looked at her when he said it made Keira's breath catch. She looked away, focusing on her hot chocolate, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. "I should probably actually do some work," she said, pulling out her sketchbook. "Don't mind me, draw away." But she found it hard to concentrate with Roman beside her. He didn't interrupt, didn't make demands on her attention, but his presence was magnetic. After 15 minutes of accomplishing nothing, she gave up. "Want to walk?" she suggested. They strolled through the park, their pace unhurried despite the cold. Roman pointed out places from his childhood, the tree he'd fallen out of and broken his arm, the field where he'd played soccer until the streetlights came on, the path where he'd had his first kiss. "Melissa Romano," he said with a nostalgic grin. "She had braces and tasted like cherry lip gloss." "Romantic," Keira teased. "I was 13. It was the height of romance at the time." He bumped her shoulder gently with his. "What about you, first kiss?" Danny Park, behind the bleachers at a football game. I was 15 and had no idea what I was doing. Pretty sure I accidentally bit his lip. Roman laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. Now that's romantic. They talked until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Keira couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this comfortable with someone, this quickly. It should have worried her, but instead it felt right. "Same time tomorrow?" Roman asked when they finally circled back to the bench. "You're really committed to this therapy spot thing." "Maybe I like the company." Keira smiled, butterflies dancing in her stomach. "Tomorrow." It became a pattern. Every evening at 5:30, Keira would leave work and head to the park, and Roman would be there waiting. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence while she sketched. He never seemed rushed, never checked his phone constantly like most people did. He was just present, fully engaged in whatever conversation they were having. On the 5th day, it started raining halfway through their meeting. Not a light drizzle, but a proper downpour that sent everyone else in the park scrambling for cover. "Come on," Roman said, grabbing her hand. "There's a cafe 2 blocks from here." They ran through the rain, laughing like children, and arrived at the small coffee shop completely drenched. The owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, took one look at them and brought over towels without being asked. "You two are going to catch your death," she scolded gently. Keira tried to dry her hair, aware that she probably looked like a drowned rat. When she glanced at Roman, she found him staring at her with an expression that made her heart race. "What?" she asked self-consciously. "Nothing." "You just look happy." "I am happy." The realization surprised her. "I haven't felt this way in a long time." Roman reached across the small table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Me neither." The cafe became their backup location for rainy days. They'd order coffee and split whatever pastry looked good, their conversations growing deeper and more personal. Roman told her about the pressure of running a company he'd inherited, the weight of expectations and legacy. Keira opened up about her fear of never being good enough, of remaining invisible forever. "You're not invisible," Roman said firmly one evening, 3 weeks into their meetings. "You're the most visible person I've ever met. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you bite your bottom lip when you're concentrating. I know you have 17 different laughs, each one for different situations. I know you care deeply about creating beautiful spaces for people, and that you get this light in your eyes when you talk about architecture. I know you're brilliant and talented, and you deserve every opportunity you've been denied." Keira felt tears prick her eyes. "Roman, I also know that I look forward to 5:30 every day more than anything else in my life," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "And I know I probably shouldn't say that after only 3 weeks, but I've never been good at playing it cool." "You seem pretty cool to me," Keira whispered. He laughed softly. "Trust me, I'm not. Not when it comes to you." She should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why this successful businessman had so much free time every evening, why he never talked about his company in specific terms, why he seemed content to exist in this bubble with her. But Keira didn't want to pop the bubble. Not yet. Instead, she leaned across the table and kissed him. It was soft and tentative, a question more than a statement. Roman answered by cupping her face with both hands, deepening the kiss until Keira forgot they were in a public cafe, forgot everything except the feeling of his lips on hers. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, the elderly owner was watching them with a knowing smile. "About time," she said in accented English. "I was starting to think you two were just friends." Keira felt heat flood her cheeks, but Roman just laughed and pulled her closer. Definitely not just friends. They left the cafe hand in hand, the rain having stopped while they were inside. The streets were slick and shining under the streetlights, the city washed clean. "I should probably tell you something," Roman said as they walked slowly toward the subway station. He sounded nervous, which was unusual for him. Keira's stomach tightened. Here it was the revelation that he was married or moving to another country or some other relationship-ending bomb. "Okay. My company, the one I mentioned. It's not just some small operation. It's Sinclair Development. We're one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the country." The name clicked into place with almost physical force. Sinclair Development. She'd seen their signs on construction sites all over the city, had read articles about their projects in architectural magazines. They were massive, powerful, influential. "You're that Roman Sinclair," she said slowly. "You're a billionaire," he winced. "I hate that word, but yes, technically." Keira pulled her hand from his, taking a step back. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because people treat me differently when they know. They want something from me, or they are intimidated, or they act fake. You just treated me like a person. I needed that." Roman's expression was pleading. "I wasn't trying to deceive you, Keira. I just wanted to be Roman for a while, not Roman Sinclair of Sinclair Development. You let me complain about my job, about money, about my student loans. Because those are real problems. Your struggles don't become less valid because I have money." Keira wanted to be angry, wanted to feel betrayed, but she could see the genuine fear in his eyes, fear that this would change everything, that she'd walk away. "This is crazy," she said finally. "We've known each other less than a month. I know. You're a billionaire who could probably date supermodels or celebrities or whoever you wanted. I don't want supermodels or celebrities. I want the woman who told me to move over on a park bench and then proceeded to completely upend my entire life in the best possible way." Despite everything, Keira felt a smile tugging at her lips. "I did tell you to move over, didn't I? You did. Best thing that's happened to me in years." Roman took a cautious step closer. "I know this is a lot to process. I can give you space if you need it, but please don't disappear, please." Keira thought about the past 3 weeks, about how Roman had made her feel seen and valued in ways she'd never experienced before. Yes, he'd withheld information, but she understood why. And looking at him now, vulnerable and nervous, she realized that her feelings were already too deep to just walk away. "I'm not disappearing," she said, "but you have to promise me something, anything. No more secrets. If we're doing this, we do it honestly." Relief flooded his features. "Deal, no more secrets." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Keira let herself sink into the embrace. It did change things, knowing who he was, but maybe not in the way she'd feared. "I still can't believe you're a billionaire," she murmured against his chest. "You drink coffee shop coffee and sit on freezing park benches." "I contain multitudes," Roman said solemnly, then laughed when she swatted his arm. "Come on, let me take you to dinner. A real dinner, not the sandwich cart in the park. Are we talking fancy billionaire dinner? We can do fancy, or we can do the best hole-in-the-wall Italian place in Brooklyn. Your choice." "Italian," Keira said without hesitation. "Always Italian." The restaurant was small and crowded and perfect, with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles. The owner greeted Roman like an old friend, which apparently he'd been coming here since college. Over pasta and wine, Roman told her more about his life. About inheriting the company at 32 when his father died. About struggling to fill shoes that felt impossibly large. About the guilt of being successful at something that had pulled him away from his father in the first place. "He was so proud when I got into Columbia," Roman said, twirling linguine around his fork. "Proud that I was getting opportunities he never had." But then I graduated and went straight into finance, and I could see it hurt him. I was building portfolios instead of buildings. When he died and I took over his company, I thought I could honor his legacy by growing it. But I think I just made it into something he wouldn't recognize. It's not too late to change that, Keira said. To build something that matters to you. Is that what you do? If money wasn't an issue, Keira took a sip of wine, considering. I design affordable housing that doesn't look like affordable housing. Beautiful, functional spaces for people who deserve dignity in where they live. Community centers that bring neighborhoods together. Parks and playgrounds that kids actually want to use. She stopped, embarrassed. Sorry, I get carried away. Don't apologize. That's amazing. Roman's eyes were bright with interest. Tell me more. So she did. She talked about her design philosophy, about the architects who inspired her, about the projects she dreamed of creating someday. Roman listened intently, asking questions that showed he genuinely understood and cared about her vision. You should start your own firm, he said when she finally ran out of words. I'm serious. You're too talented to keep working for someone who doesn't appreciate you. Roman, I know. I'm not offering to fund you or anything that would make this weird. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I'm just saying you should think about it. You have the talent and the vision. The rest is logistics. Keira squeezed his fingers, warmth spreading through her chest. You really believe in me, completely. They stayed at the restaurant until closing, reluctant to end the evening. When Roman finally walked her to her apartment in Bushwick, a modest 2-bedroom she shared with a roommate, he kissed her goodnight on the stoop like they were in an old movie. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked. And the day after that, and possibly every day after for the foreseeable future. Keira laughed. That's pretty intense for less than a month. I'm an intense person. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Their relationship shifted into something more official after that. Roman took her to art galleries and architecture exhibitions, to Broadway shows and quiet bookstores. But their favorite times were still the simple ones: park bench conversations, coffee shop afternoons, walks through the city as it transformed from fall to winter. Keira met his mother, Patricia, a vibrant woman in her 60s who hugged Keira like they'd known each other for years. Over Sunday dinner in Patricia's brownstone, she regaled Keira with embarrassing stories about Roman's childhood. He was such a serious little boy, Patricia said, passing the mashed potatoes. Always building things with his blocks, always planning the next project. His father used to say he had an old soul. Mom, Roman protested, but he was smiling. I'm just saying it's nice to see you happy again, sweetheart. You've been so focused on work for so long. Patricia turned to Keira. You're good for him. He's good for me too, Keira admitted. After dinner, Roman showed Keira his childhood bedroom, which his mother had kept largely unchanged. There were soccer trophies and model buildings, posters of famous skyscrapers, and photographs of a younger Roman with a man who looked like an older version of him. Your dad, Keira said, studying the photos. Yeah, Roman came to stand beside her. I miss him every day, but being with you makes it hurt a little less. You help me remember the good parts. Keira turned to face him, cupping his jaw. I wish I could have met him. He would have loved you. Probably would have liked you more than me. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, pouring all her feelings into it. When they broke apart, Roman rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I know it's fast, and I know we should probably wait to say things like that, but I do. I love you, Keira. Her heart felt too big for her chest. I love you too. 2 months into their relationship, Keira walked into her office to find her boss taking credit for her carousel design in a presentation to the museum board. Again. She sat through the entire meeting, watching him gesture at her concepts, her sketches, her vision, while barely acknowledging her presence. When it ended, she went back to her desk, opened her laptop, and drafted a resignation letter. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, ever since Roman had planted the seed. Not because he was pushing her, he never did, but because he'd made her believe she was capable of more. She had some savings, enough to live on for a few months if she was careful. She had a portfolio of work, even if none of it had her name prominently attached. She had talent and vision, and most importantly, she had nothing left to lose by trying. Her boss was shocked when she handed in her notice. "You're making a mistake," he said coldly. "You'll never make it on your own." "Maybe," Keira agreed, "but at least I'll fail on my own terms, not yours." She walked out of the building with her box of belongings, feeling terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. When she called Roman to tell him what she'd done, he immediately left a meeting to come meet her. "You did it," he said, picking her up and spinning her around on the sidewalk. "You actually did it. I'm probably insane. You're brave. There's a difference." He set her down, his hands on her shoulders. "And you're not doing this alone, not financially," he added quickly when she started to protest. "I know you want to build this yourself, but you're not alone. I'm here, whatever you need." What she needed, it turned out, was space to work. Her apartment was too small and too chaotic with her roommate's unpredictable schedule. Roman offered her a solution: a small office in a building his company owned, rent-free for the first year. "It's just sitting empty," he insisted when she hesitated. "You'd actually be doing me a favor by using it." "That's a terrible business argument." "Good thing I'm not arguing as a businessman. I'm arguing as your boyfriend who wants to support your dreams." The office was perfect, a corner unit with big windows and enough space for a drafting table and all her materials. Keira set up her new firm, Abbott Architecture, with a sense of purpose she'd never felt before. The first few months were lean. She took on small residential projects, renovations, and consulting work. Nothing glamorous, but she was building a reputation, slowly establishing herself. Roman helped in ways that didn't undermine her independence. He introduced her to people in the industry, but made it clear she'd earned their attention through her talent, not his influence. When she landed her first major project, a community center in the Bronx, he celebrated with her like it was his own victory. "This is incredible, Keira," he said, studying her designs. "This is exactly what you talked about that first night at the Italian restaurant. You're making it happen." "It's one project. It's the first of many," he was right. The community center led to other opportunities. A developer who wasn't affiliated with Roman's company hired her to design a mixed-use building in Brooklyn. An arts organization commissioned her for a gallery renovation. Abbott Architecture was growing, and Keira was finally getting her name on buildings. Their relationship deepened as they navigated the challenges of both running businesses. They understood each other's pressures in ways that friends and family couldn't. When Roman struggled with whether to accept a controversial development project that would displace low-income residents, Keira talked him through the ethical implications. When Keira panicked about cash flow and overhead costs, Roman helped her create a more sustainable business model. "We make a good team," he said one night, lying in bed in his apartment. They'd been staying there most nights since her place was too small and his was closer to both their offices. "We do," Keira agreed, tracing patterns on his chest. "Though I never expected to be dating someone whose apartment has more square footage than most people's houses." "Is it weird? The money thing?" She considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. When you casually mention having dinner with senators or attending galas where tickets cost more than I made in a month at my old job. But you never make me feel less than, and you respect what I'm trying to build." That's what matters. For what it's worth, I'm prouder of what you've accomplished in 8 months than anything I've done with my company in years. Roman, I mean it. You started from nothing and created something meaningful. I just inherited an empire and tried not to destroy it. Keira shifted to look at him properly. You're being too hard on yourself. You've grown the company while maintaining your father's values. That's not nothing. I've been thinking about making some changes, Roman admitted. Your community center project got me thinking. What if Sinclair Development started focusing more on that kind of work? Affordable housing, community spaces, sustainable development. We could still be profitable but also make a real difference. That's a big shift. Your board would fight you. Let them. I control 51% of the company. They can complain all they want. His expression turned determined. Life's too short to spend it building soulless luxury condos for people who already have 3 other homes. My dad built things that mattered to communities. I want to do the same. Then do it, Keira said simply. I'll support you whatever happens. Roman pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. How did I get so lucky? You told a stranger to move over on a bench and somehow I ended up with you. And you listened. Most men wouldn't have. Most men are idiots. They laughed together in the darkness, and Keira felt a certainty settle over her. This was it. This was the person she wanted to build a life with. Roman must have felt the same way, because 2 months later, on a cold February afternoon, he brought her back to the park bench where they'd met. It's been a year, he said, even though it had actually only been 10 months. Close enough. Romantic, Keira teased, but her heart was pounding. She'd seen the way he'd been nervous all week, the way he kept touching his jacket pocket. I'm serious. 1 year ago, I was sitting here alone, feeling lost and wondering what the point of any of it was. Then you showed up and told me to move over, and everything changed. Roman got down on one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. You made me remember why I love building things, why creating spaces for people matters. You made me want to be better, do better. You made me feel alive again. Keira's eyes filled with tears. I know we're young, well, relatively young. I know we've only known each other 10 months. But I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Keira Abbott, will you marry me? The ring was beautiful, a simple diamond set in platinum, elegant and classic. But Keira barely looked at it. She was too focused on Roman's face, on the hope and love shining in his gray eyes. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that made her dizzy. Around them, a few people in the park started clapping. An elderly couple on a nearby bench cheered. This is our bench, Roman said when they finally broke apart. This is where everything started. Where you almost didn't move over and I almost walked away. Best decision I ever made, moving over for you. They got married 4 months later in a ceremony that perfectly balanced both their worlds. It was held in a beautifully restored historic building in Brooklyn, not one of Roman's properties, because Keira insisted on keeping some boundaries. Patricia cried through the entire ceremony. Tyler flew in from South Korea to walk Keira down the aisle, since their father had passed away years ago. The guest list was an eclectic mix of Roman's business associates, Keira's artist and architect friends, and their combined families. The reception featured food from the Italian restaurant, where they'd had their first real date, and music from a jazz band playing in a community center Keira had designed. You two are disgustingly perfect together, Tyler said during the reception, hugging Keira tightly. I mean that as a compliment. I know I got lucky, Keira said, watching Roman talk animatedly with one of her former professors. You both did. He looks at you like you hung the moon. Roman had indeed been looking at her like that all day, like he couldn't quite believe she was real, that this was happening. When they had their first dance, he held her close and whispered, "I love you, Mrs. Sinclair." "I'm keeping Abbott professionally," she reminded him. "I love you, Mrs. Sinclair, who is professionally Miss Abbott and personally a pain in my ass." She laughed against his shoulder. "Better. The first year of marriage was an adjustment." They sold Roman's bachelor pad and bought a brownstone in Park Slope together, spending months renovating it to their exact specifications. Keira handled the design, obviously, creating a space that was both elegant and comfortable, with a home office for each of them. Roman followed through on his promise to shift Sinclair Development's focus. It wasn't easy. Several board members resigned, and there were some tense quarters financially. But slowly, the company's reputation began to change. They started winning contracts for civic projects, partnering with cities on sustainable housing initiatives, and developing mixed-income properties that actually served communities. Abbott architecture continued to grow as well. Keira hired 2 junior architects and a project manager, finally able to take on multiple projects simultaneously. She won an award for the community center design and was featured in architectural magazines. Her name was getting known, and more importantly, her work was making a difference. They celebrated their second anniversary back on the park bench, bundled in winter coats and sharing hot chocolate from the same cart Roman used to visit with his father. "Think we'll still be doing this in 50 years?" Keira asked, leaning against his shoulder. "I hope so. Though we might need more cushioning by then. Speak for yourself. I plan to age gracefully." Roman kissed her temple. "You'll be beautiful at 80, probably still telling people to move over. Someone has to keep you in line." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the park transform as evening approached. Streetlights flickered on and parents started calling their children home for dinner. The city hummed around them with its endless energy. "I've been thinking," Roman said carefully, "about kids." Keira's heart skipped. They talked about it abstractly but never seriously. "Yeah. I know you're focused on building the firm. I'm not trying to rush you, but I want you to know I'm ready whenever you are. I think you'd be an amazing mother." Keira thought about it. The firm was stable now, and she had good people working with her. The terrified scrambling of the first year had settled into something more sustainable. "Maybe we could start trying," she said slowly. "See what happens." Roman pulled back to look at her, eyes wide. "Really? Really? I'm 33, you're 41. If we want kids, we should probably get moving." "That's the least romantic way to say that. Would you prefer I recite poetry about your genetic material?" He laughed and kissed her soundly. "I love you exactly as you are, romance challenged and all." Getting pregnant took longer than expected. Months passed with disappointing negative tests. Keira tried not to let it stress her, but it was hard. Roman was endlessly supportive, reminding her that these things took time, that they had options if needed. Finally, on a rainy morning in October, 3 years after their wedding, Keira saw 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. She stared at it for a full minute, afraid to believe it. "Roman," she called out, her voice shaking. He appeared in the bathroom doorway immediately, hair still wet from the shower. "What's wrong?" Wordlessly, she held up the test. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, understanding, shock, and finally pure joy. "Are you serious?" We're having a baby," Keira confirmed. Tears streaming down her face, Roman swept her up, spinning her around the bathroom while laughing. "We're having a baby. Oh my God, we're having a baby." The pregnancy was mostly smooth, though Keira's dedication to her work sometimes clashed with her body's need for rest. Roman became ridiculously protective, fussing over her eating habits and trying to limit her stress. It drove her crazy, but she also found it endearing. They converted one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, and Keira threw herself into designing the perfect space. Nothing generic or conventional, she wanted her child to grow up surrounded by creativity and possibility. She painted a mural of the New York City skyline on one wall, with tiny details hidden throughout that a child could discover over the years. "This is incredible," Roman said, watching her add finishing touches despite being 7 months pregnant. "Our kid is so lucky." "Our kid doesn't know how lucky yet," Keira said, rubbing her aching back. "But they will." Their daughter was born on a snowy evening in March, arriving 3 weeks early and making her presence known with powerful lungs. They named her Rose Marie Sinclair, Rose for Roman's middle name, and Marie after Keira's mother. Roman cried when he held her for the first time, this tiny perfect human they'd created together. "She looks like you," he said in wonder. "She looks like an angry potato," Keira said fondly, exhausted and overwhelmed and more in love than she'd ever thought possible. Patricia came to visit the next day, bringing food and help and an endless supply of wisdom. "She's beautiful," she said, cradling her granddaughter. "Your father would have been so proud, Roman." "I wish he could have met her," Roman said quietly. "He knows. Trust me, he knows, and he's watching over all of you." The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves. Abbott Architecture scaled back to just consulting work for a while, with Keira's team handling most of the day-to-day operations. Roman took paternity leave, something nearly unheard of for a CEO, and they figured out parenting together through trial and error. Rose was 6 months old when they took her to the park bench for the first time. "This is where Mommy and Daddy met," Roman told her, even though she was far too young to understand. "This is where everything began." Rose gurgled and grabbed at Keira's hair, completely unimpressed by the significance of the location. "She's not moved by our origin story," Keira laughed, gently untangling tiny fingers from her curls. "Give her time. When she's older, we'll tell her how Mommy told Daddy to move over and Daddy fell in love immediately. That's not quite how it happened. Close enough." Roman put his arm around her shoulders. The three of them squeezed together on the bench. "The important part is I moved over and I never quite left." "No, you didn't," Keira agreed, leaning into him. "You really didn't." They sat there as the afternoon faded into evening, their daughter cooing between them, and Keira thought about all the small moments that had led them here. The cold November day she'd been annoyed by a stranger taking up too much space. The hot chocolate and rain-soaked laughter. The first kiss in a cafe and the engagement on this very bench. The wedding, the waiting, the baby in her arms. "What are you thinking?" Roman asked softly. "That I'm glad I came to the park that day. That I'm glad you were sitting on my bench." "Our bench," he corrected. "Our bench," she agreed. Rose made a happy sound as if approving of this amendment. The three of them sat together as the city moved around them. A family built on the foundation of a chance meeting and 2 words: move over. Years would pass. Abbott Architecture would grow into one of the most respected firms in the city, known for designs that balanced beauty and social responsibility. Sinclair Development would become a leader in sustainable community-focused building, winning awards and changing the industry. Rose would grow up hearing the story of how her parents met, would roll her eyes as a teenager when they got sappy about it, and would eventually bring her own first date to see the famous bench. But that evening, with their infant daughter between them and the park settling into its evening rhythm, Roman and Keira simply held each other and marveled at the beautiful, unexpected life they'd built together. All because she'd been brave enough to tell a stranger to move over and he'd been wise enough to listen. "I love you," Roman said, kissing her forehead. I love you too, Keira replied. Even though you nearly didn't move over, I moved. That's what matters. That you moved or that you stayed. Roman smiled, pulling her closer. Both, definitely both. And on a bench in Riverside Park, with their daughter cooing and the city lights beginning to glow, a love story that had started with a simple request continued to unfold in all its complicated, beautiful reality. Because sometimes the best things in life begin with the smallest moments: a cold afternoon, a shared bench, and the courage to ask for what you need, even from a stranger. Keira looked at her husband, at her daughter, at the park that had become so central to their story, and felt grateful for every choice that had led her here. The struggling years at the terrible firm, the decision to claim her bench space, the impulse to talk to a lonely-looking stranger. All of it had been necessary to arrive at this moment. Same time tomorrow, Roman asked the question that had become their tradition. Every day, Keira promised, for the rest of our lives, and they meant it. Through Rose's childhood and the eventual arrival of her brother, Nathan, 2 years later, through the ups and downs of running their businesses and raising their family, through arguments and makeups, successes and failures, ordinary days and extraordinary ones, they kept coming back to the bench, to the place where it all started, because some love stories begin with dramatic gestures or love at first sight. But theirs had started simply with a woman who wanted her space, a man who needed perspective, and a moment of connection that neither of them ever wanted to end. Roman had moved over when she asked, making room for her on the bench and in his life. And true to his word, he never quite left. He stayed through everything, building a life and a family and a future that neither of them could have imagined that cold November day. The bench remained their anchor, their reminder of where they'd started and how far they'd come. And every time they sat there together, no matter what chaos the world was throwing at them, they remembered the simple truth that had brought them together. Sometimes all you have to do is ask for what you need, and the right person will make room for you in their heart.